To order. We have a pretty full agenda today. I want to start by kind of taking the roll for the officers that are up for decertification to see if they're present. If you're present and hear your name, just say here. Landon Bagwell. Landon Bagwell. Kristen Childress. Childress. Let's see, Eric. Bradley, Metro Police. Preston Hemphill. Here, sir. Brandon Hughes. Billy Joe Langford. Here. Skylar Lopp. Cody Mang. Oh, he's in. Elijah Presley. Here, sir. Jacob Smith. Michael Strope. Here, sir. Carol Valise. Aiken Whitlock.
I believe she was also.
Just since our chairman has a deputy that's up here, we're going to go ahead and take that one first so that we can resume our business. So we're going to change the agenda slightly. If we could have a representative, we're going to call the matter of Eric Clem in front of us now. Mr. Clem was terminated for violation of policy and procedures after testing positive for drugs during a drug screen. Do we have a representative from the Coffee County Sheriff's Office?
I'll be Sheriff Parton. I'll be recusing myself from the vote today and will be the presenter of the case.
Go ahead, please, Sheriff.
Yes, thank you. Members of the board, unfortunately, we had an incident with Mr. Clem. Mr. Clem filed a workman's comp claim October 25th of 22, where he filed for a slight injury that he received while on duty. Based off of that injury, he was required by policy to take a drug urinalysis test based off that workman's comp policy. Those results came back on October 27th, 2022. Checking, let me read back. The drug screen results were checked daily by the HR department beginning October 27th, 2022. Due to a normal turnaround period of 48 hours, the last log results were around 11 a.m. on 11/2/22, and the results were still pending. The drug testing facility messaged our county HR department by cell phone on 11/2 at around 4:55 p.m., stating that Mr. Clem had a positive result in his drug test for oxycodone and had not presented any type of prescription. Due to that response, HR immediately contacted my clerical staff that afternoon on the 2nd of November 2022 via email. The secretary or administrative assistant from my department contacted me by phone, where I immediately contacted after hours our HR director. It was around 5:41 p.m. regarding this result, and had a conversation with Miss Heather Shelton, who's our HR director for the county, stating that the drug testing company had notified her that Mr. Clem had a positive result for oxycodone and could not provide a prescription, nor could they find where he had been prescribed recently any oxycodone. I advised her that the next morning, which would be 11/3, that I would come to her office immediately at around sometime after 8 a.m. on the 3rd of November 22. Myself and command staff, along with Deputy Clem's immediate supervisor, went to the county HR department. County HR notified Mr. Clem to come to the office. Once he came to the office, he was confronted with this result. Mr. Clem could not provide a proper prescription for oxycodone. I think during those conversations he stated that he had had a prescription for hydrocodone at one time and that it was supposed to be on file with the sheriff's office. Based off the conversations we had of why he did this, he had was in pain of some sort. I do not know how he got the oxycodone drug. I did not get into that matter. By our drug-free workplace policy within the county, HR advised me that we did not have no choice but to terminate Mr. Clem on those grounds. We immediately disarmed Mr. Clem, took possession of his property. Mr. Clem was an SRO at our high school. We escorted with him to his office and cleaned his office out, took possession of his vehicle and all the inventory for the department, and Mr. Clem was immediately terminated from the department. I since have not had any contact with Mr. Clem or had any conversation with him about this issue. You're going to see in your packet that we also submitted that we had had some psychological testing issues with Mr. Clem, which is based off of some trust issues. Mr. Clem applied for the Tennessee Highway Patrol Department of Safety. On May 13th, 2021, Mr. Clem was notified by the Department of Safety that he had filed their psychological testing procedures to go to work for the Tennessee Highway Patrol. He did not notify my department nor any of his supervisors. I was contacted by the former director of the Post Commission, Dexter Mines, that we had an employee that had filed a psychological test with another agency and that we should disarm him and set him aside until those results could be ratified. I pulled Mr. Clem in, had a conversation with him while we were not notified because we had the messaging and communications between him and the Department of Safety. In my fairness, I allowed Mr. Clem, when the first appointment he could have, to go and seek another test. Mr. Clem, by that evaluation, did pass and was put back to work. I'm not saying that this issue it should take any major weight in this matter today, but it's just a type of some trust issues that started following a pattern of issues of trust, and his sole termination from the department was because of failure of the drug test, because he could not provide a prescription, nor had he notified us that he was taking that type of medication. And I will be available to answer any questions that the board may have.
I'll have just a couple of questions, Commissioner Chair. Sheriff, with Deputy Clem's history as a deputy and as an SRO, what was his record? Did he have a good record? Was he a competent officer?
I felt that he was a competent officer. Mr. Clem has had some marital issues throughout his career. He's had some, drama with spouses and ex-wives that we've had to have counsel with him on. He's been threatened with order of protections and things of that nature. Had we had formal disciplinary actions on those? No, sir. We have had conversations and we've had verbal counseling. There has been some internal investigations in those matters. With him being our premier SRO, which was our premier high school SRO, we have him involved in activities with our high school students, and it's above and beyond expectations from individuals in those schools, and we kind of have a zero tolerance for drama, but there was not grounds to terminate on that fact. But with the psychological issues and then this come about, I was put in a position with county HR and our strict drug-free workplace policy that I had no choice but to relieve him of his duties. No time during our conversations or no time during any part of this interaction did Mr. Clem ever take responsibility if he had a problem. Did he ask for rehab? Had he ever had any conversation with his superiors, coworkers in the faculty of the school, or anything? Did he ever say he had a drug problem or needed help? All he asked me is the day of the termination, what can I do to get out of this? I've got to have my job. And I explained to him that I didn't have no choice but to honor the Drug-Free Workplace Act, and it's a very strict act.
Any other questions from members of the informal committee? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and ask Mr. Clem if you would step to the podium. And you may, if you would, identify yourselves, both of you, and then you may present your side of the case.
My name is Lauren Irwin. I'm Mr. Clem's attorney.
Can you turn the microphone on? There.
Mr. Clem is currently litigating the circumstances of his termination and has filed a formal charge with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So we've come before you today to request that this hearing be held in suspended status pending the outcome of that litigation.
How long have you known you were going to request the suspended status?
I believe I sent an email following the receipt of the letter notifying Mr. Clem of the hearing, stating that we had filed the EEOC charge on April 4th. So I believe the letter came shortly after that, and I sent a letter in response stating that we were going to request suspended.
We did a letter dated May 1st. The completion of the litigation.
That would be up to the committee members here if somebody wants to make a motion for that, or to go ahead and hear the.
This is Commissioner Cherry again. I think just turning to legal, I think we have a basic precedent, don't we, for these cases when they're in some kind of claims before the Claims Commission or some other kind of other appellate entity that we hold off until that's fair to say.
I think it's that, and historically that's when, and in conjunction with the respondent showing up to make an in-person request, that's the way the commission
Well, I'll make that motion that
We have a motion and a second to place this in suspended status. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. All right, ayes have it. Suspended status.
Just for a point of clarification, that being in suspended status, his status as a law enforcement officer is also, he's not able to function as a police officer while this is pending. Is that correct?
I believe as long as it's pending, I'll defer to legal that he can serve as a police officer, post-certified police officer with another agency. It will be noted in his file, though, that he is pending decertification. Okay, moving on to the next matter on our agenda. It will be Landon Reese Bagwell of the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department. Mr. Bagwell resigned prior to internal investigation for violating multiple rules and regulations. Mr. Bagwell, are you in attendance today?
I believe Mr. Bagwell sent a text message to Investigator Krieb earlier this afternoon. If he wants to share what was sent.
Would you step up to the podium, identify yourself, and let us know exactly what this person said.
Kevin Krieb, post investigator. He said, "Greetings, sorry for the delay. I sought legal advice. If possible, I would like certification to be placed in pending status. However, I will not be able to attend today's hearing." I informed him that him or his attorney needed to be present to make that request in person. And he didn't respond back to me.
Make a motion to default, approve on default.
Second.
We have a motion for a default order of decertification for the termination. For the resignation while under investigation for disciplinary action. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Motion passes. Weakley County Sheriff's Office. Kristen Taylor Childress of the Weakley County Sheriff's Office. Ms. Childress was arrested for aggravated statutory rape and violated policies and procedures. Do we have a representative of the Weakley County Sheriff's Office present? Would you please step up to the podium, sir, and state your name and go ahead and tell the commission the reasons for seeking this decertification.
And I may be able to help you. Is she here today?
Yes, sir.
Motion to default for approval.
All right, we have a motion and a second for default order for decertification. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you, sir. Sorry for the long drive. It
Fine,
happens.
sir. Appreciate it.
Be safe going home in the weather. We have Metropolitan Nashville Police Department, Gardner Bradley. Mr. Bradley resigned prior to completion of internal investigation for violating policies and procedures that could have resulted in termination. Is Mr. Bradley, has he arrived since we took roll earlier? He is not.
I believe Mr. Bradley sent Investigator Krieb an email today about his whereabouts.
Would you step up and let the commission know exactly where he is today? And he was properly served, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Kevin Krieb, post investigator. Let me. Good afternoon. I have an issue with the upcoming post-hearing. I'm currently in Greece at the end of my honeymoon. My wife became ill this morning in the evening, and we were unable to travel home back to the United States. I was supposed to return today. This was sent yesterday. I do not think we'll be able to be home by the hearing. If possible, reschedule. And I then informed him of him or a representative attorney need to be present for the hearing, and I wish his family well.
Thank you, sir. When was he notified by certified mail? Do we have that in the file there, Mr. Director?
Yes. Let's see. He was called and texted May 2nd and 3rd, respectively. The letter was sent and the green card was returned. Let's see. The GDI and training officer emailed of the hearing date and time on June 2nd, and a text was sent on the location to him on June 2nd.
He knew that before he went to Greece. I'll make a motion to approve by default.
We have a motion for default and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to the Memphis Police Department and Preston Robert Hemphill. Mr. Hemphill was terminated during an internal investigation where he violated policies and procedures. Mr. Hemphill is here. Do we have representatives from the Memphis Police Department? Go ahead and step on up to the podium. Would please identify yourself with your name and rank, and go ahead and state the reasons why you're seeking decertification.
Sir, I want to interrupt you too, and everybody that's in here, but sometimes these informals can get very long. This is like a probable cause hearing in General Sessions Court. It's just a probable cause hearing. It's not a formal trial. So we don't have to get in the total weeds with a lot of details and longevity because we have it here in our file. So if you just want to give us the Cliff Note version, please, sir, and we can move right along. Thank you.
I'm Lieutenant Keith Morris. I'm the Internal Affairs Supervisor for the Memphis Police Department. On January 7, 2023, members of the Memphis Police Department Scorpion Unit conducted a traffic stop where the driver of the stopped vehicle was Mr. Tyree Nichols. Mr. Nichols fled from the traffic stop but was located by officers in a nearby neighborhood. Officers used force against Mr. Nichols during his arrest, and as a result of that force that was used, Mr. Nichols sustained critical injuries that night. That same night, an administrative investigation was opened by the Memphis Police Department regarding these actions. On January 10th, 3 days later, Mr. Nichols passed away, at least in part due to the injuries that he received in that arrest. The administrative investigation revealed that Officer Preston Hemphill was one of the officers who conducted the original traffic stop. In that incident, Officer Hemphill was found to be in violation of the following Memphis Police Department policies: personal conduct, use of the conducted energy weapon, truthfulness, uniform policy, and inventory and processing recovered property. On February 3rd, 2023, an administrative hearing was held with Deputy Chief Michael Hardy, and Officer Hemphill was terminated due to these violations.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Parton. This was an officer involved or an arrest or something where there was a death that took place. Is that what you said?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was there any investigation done by the District Attorney General or TBI related to this?
There was an investigation conducted in which 5 members of that unit were indicted regarding these charges. Officer Hemphill was not one of those officers, and he was not charged by the Attorney General's office. There is currently an open federal and criminal investigation into this and pending civil litigation.
Thank you.
This is Commissioner Chair. When you say there's an investigation pending, is there any indication that he is a subject of that investigation, or
that investigation is being conducted by the FBI Department of Justice? I have no knowledge or information as to that.
As far as the agency is concerned, is there anything pending with Mr. Hemphill at this stage, or all those proceedings?
Yes, sir. All the proceedings have been concluded regarding this administrative investigation.
I guess I have one question. Was his specific?
He was one of the officers who conducted the original traffic stop. He did deploy his taser against Mr. Nichols as Mr. Nichols fled. He was resisting on the scene and as he fled from that original traffic stop scene. After that, he was responsible for some administrative duties on the original traffic stop scene, such as towing the vehicle, things of that nature. Never actually made the scene of the arrest.
Chairman Parton again, was body camera footage on Mr. Hemphill?
Yes.
Would that be some of that body camera footage that's been shown nationwide and worldwide?
Commissioner Isbell.
Another question, if I may. You'd mentioned that one of the reasons for his termination was truthfulness. Could you give us a little more detail about exactly what he was untruthful about?
Yes, sir. That involved statements that he had made in his use of force reports and regarding the initial resistance during the traffic stop, which included that he stated that Mr. Nichols was attempting to get one of the officer's weapons, his gun. In his statement, internal investigative statement, he stated that he did not see that happen.
I don't, because of the nature of this case, Lieutenant, and I don't want legal counsel to keep particularly myself in line, but I know we have an issue of discovery here because there's going to be a national trial go on. And it's hard for any of us here in Tennessee law enforcement, and particularly this board, that's not had this shoved in our face. But he was the initial traffic stop. Was he the initial person that initiated this traffic stop?
No, sir. He was not the initial person that stopped.
Is he the secondary person?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Do y'all have, does Memphis PD just have body cameras, or do y'all have in-car cams as well?
Both.
Is there in-car cam of why this traffic stop took place?
No, sir, there's not.
It just starts from the exit of the vehicle.
That's correct.
Chairman, Commissioner Isbell, just a question, I guess procedural question. If I understood you correctly, there is pending criminal investigation going on at this time with him.
Yes, sir.
Is it
not locally with Officer Hemphill? There's still a pending criminal investigation, yes, by the FBI. And again, I don't have the information as far as to whether he is a target necessarily in that an ultimate target in that investigation or not.
So you're saying that on the federal level, they've taken up civil rights, use of violation of Civil Rights Act on, I'm sure, everybody involved in this case.
Yes, sir.
Above
understand.
above and beyond the local state charges that
Yes,
are
sir.
pending. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
I have no further questions.
I have one thing.
Yes, go ahead.
Terminated from Memphis.
I have no knowledge.
This is my federal investigation. Somewhere down the road, that's going to come. Until that's all.
As long as he is not decertified, he is certifiable. He's not certified right now because he's not employed. Certification is attached to employment in an agency, but he could be employed. Yes.
Somebody hired him, he could be working.
Yes.
Commissioner Wright, as an informal body, we do have the ability to place him in suspended status, do we not? Commissioner Wright, I'll make a motion that we place him in suspended status pending the conclusion of the federal investigation.
You want to hear this is a question for legal. Do we need to hear from his attorney and he or both here?
It's up to you all if you want to. You don't have to. If you want to.
And I want to make sure that, as Chairman Parton again for the record, that Mr. Hemphill has his due process, and we're not saying that he is guilty of any crime. We're not saying that he's guilty of any accusations that the department has said. We're not saying that the state of Tennessee and the United States government is falsely or accusing him of anything. What we're saying is that based on us with the Tennessee Post Commission is that we're putting his license to practice in a suspended mode until this entire investigation in Memphis dealing with all these officers and all these people, and I think that's pretty much what we've done in some of the other cases as well that's already been presented to us. Some of them, I think, have voluntarily already given up their licenses, and then some of them are still pending until the trial is their day in court is over. But being that there is an ongoing federal investigation and whatnot, with the nature of these circumstances, that's where we're at, and we're not trying to cut Mr. Hemphill out of his word today. This is strictly a civil matter. He will have his opportunity to come back and reactivate, yay or nay, after all this investigation's over with. Does everybody understand that? Okay.
With that being said, I would maybe turn to legal again. Is it appropriate for us to have Mr. Hemphill and or his counsel to make a comment or say something before we vote on this?
I think there's a motion and a second on the floor. I think we can allow them to speak under discussion, can we?
That would be
Informal. It's informal.
If Mr. Hemphill's legal counsel wants to come to the podium and address the board, that we welcome that.
And just to make sure that I'm clear, what is the motion is to place in suspended status his commission certification rather in his suspended status, just period, correct? Of the
all investigations.
Okay. Sir, if I could get you to just have a seat, and the commission may want to hear from you again, but if you would just stand by, but we're going to let Mr. Hemphill and his attorney step up to the podium. Counselor, if you would, for the record, please identify yourself, and sir, if you could identify yourself as well. Names, please.
Excuse me. My name is Timothy Taylor. I'm an attorney from Memphis. I'm here representing Mr. Hemphill.
And I'm Preston Hemphill.
Members of the committee, thank you for allowing us to appear. My request that I was going to submit to this committee was to place his decertification terminated, agreed that his the end of service and arbitrator will get into the weeds of the actual incident and determine whether or not once that proceeding is complete, we would notify the commission. Successful at that, and the grounds for decertification do not exist, and if we aren't successful, then the commission can take the appropriate action.
I understand where you're at with that, Counselor, but this motion is until all federal and state matters are handled, because we're going to get into discovery issues. If by chance the City of Memphis Civil Service Board says, okay, you go back to work, and then he wants to come back up here, then you're going to be looking at a formal hearing here that's going to open up Pandora's box to all the co-defendants that's in this case, and that's not for anything this board to handle. That needs to be handled by the jurors of Shelby County.
I'm looking at it the reverse. I have every reason to believe that as far as Mr. Hemphill is concerned, the criminal investigations and all that prior to the matter.
They may, but I have seen where these, and I'm sure you have too, sir, where the U.S. government takes their time in other matters. But we're just trying to be fair to all those involved. And sir, we're not trying to say you're guilty or convict you of anything. We're just, until all this plays out and
The other question I would ask is, assuming for the sake of argument that all the criminal matters, federal investigations, all that conclude, and then we proceed with his employment appeal, we would still be able to request that it remain in suspended status pending the conclusion of that.
Correct.
Okay. Unless there's any further questions.
Okay, we have a motion, and we had a second on that motion, which was to suspend his post-certification until the conclusion of all investigations, period. So that is the motion that is on the floor. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Your certification, sir, is suspended until the conclusion of all investigations. All right, moving on to the Shelby County Sheriff's Office and Brandon Deshaun Hughes. Mr. Hughes was terminated for multiple violations of policy and procedures. Mr. Hughes, are you present?
Make a motion to approve by default.
Second.
We have a motion for default and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Spring City Police Department, Billy Joe Langford. Mr. Langford was terminated by Soddy Daisy Police Department for violations of general orders and truthfulness. Post-investigators investigated this incident. Let's see, post-investigator, please step up if you would for the record. Identify yourself by name and give your position, and then go ahead and state the findings of your investigation.
Bruce Cantrell, post investigator. This was initially discovered during a commission hearing for a waiver request for in-service, and it came up during the conversation that Mr. Langford was terminated from Soddy Daisy Police Department, and the commission asked for an investigation to be done on it. And I initially called the GDI for Soddy Daisy Police Department, and he gave me some of the details on it. It began when Officer Langford failed to show up for city court one day. A sergeant noticed, and he had some cases pending. The sergeant said he called, and Officer Langford said he would not be there that day. So the sergeant brought it up to the lieutenant, who brought it up to the chief, and the chief had him pull up Officer Langford's take-home vehicle AVL, and it showed that he had been outside of their allotted distance per their policy. So the chief had him pull up the history of the GPS, and it showed that he had went outside of the allotted area at least 6 times. After that, they had Officer Langford come in to speak with the chief. Initially, he either denied not doing it or said that he didn't remember doing it, and the chief confronted him with the printout of the GPS locations, and he admitted to it, at which time the chief terminated him due to truthfulness. The chief wrote up 2 statements on the situation. It's in your packet.
Is he? I briefly remember this on a regular docket.
Yes, sir.
Is he working anywhere right now?
He was, at the time that he came in for the waiver request, he was with Harriman PD, and I believe June.
And that was an
2nd.
in-service request
Yes,
for lack of hours. Is
yes,
that
sir.
my
Yes,
understanding?
Sir. And then I believe it was June 2nd he was hired with Spring City.
So he's not at any agency right now.
He is with Spring City.
He is with Spring City. Have you talked to Spring City?
I did not. Investigator Krieb did, and they're here today with him.
Were they aware of this at the time of they hired him?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Commissioner Wright, if I remember right, Soddy Daisy did not enter into the system like the reason for separation or something at the time.
I checked up on that this morning, and it has been updated. I don't know when. I don't remember when it was updated exactly, but
They didn't give you any explanation as to why they didn't do it at the time.
I don't think there was initially. If I don't remember for sure, but I'm going to say initially it wasn't.
If I recall, Commissioner Wright, I actually had got that case mixed up with another case or another situation of that day. Soddy Daisy had entered that correctly into the system at the time, so gives a good opportunity to clarify that they did everything that they were supposed to do when they entered him into the system.
That's correct. It is properly notified as terminated, and they do have in the comment section that he was terminated due to issues of truthfulness.
Any further questions of the witness? If not, Mr. Director, you can call your next.
Thank you very much, sir.
Lane from Spring City Police Department.
Okay. And who are you, sir?
Lieutenant LeBoy, Spring City.
Okay, so I was when I was working for Soddy Daisy, I was living in Decatur, Tennessee. My house caught on fire, so we had to move, and I moved north of Decatur where I was living, and I was advised by the chief that I was too far outside the city limits. So there was a couple of times that I would go to park my car at my mom's house that lives in Decatur. And the day of questioning was my wife, we was living in a motel in Dayton. We had one vehicle, it was a truck. My wife took one of my daughters to the doctor in Bradley County, and on her way back, the truck broke down. She called me. I was work day shift, 6 to 2. She called me and asked me if she told me that something's wrong with the vehicle, and I called around trying to get somebody to go help her and couldn't get a hold of nobody. So I drove, after I got off work, I just drove my vehicle to my mom's house, parked my vehicle at my mom's outside the jurisdiction, and got my mom's vehicle and went and helped my wife get my truck fixed. And then drove back to my mom's and got my vehicle and drove back to the motel where I was staying. And when they asked me, I did deny it, which, I was scared. I didn't know what to say. And then when he told me, well, your GPS shows that you's here, which I said, yeah, I did do that. And then they terminated. With Harriman over my in-service, I started at Graysville at the time, and B Academy wasn't set up for me until November, and I done got hired with Harriman, so I was working out a 2-week notice, and I just ran out of time on my in-service. And when we spoke last time, I'm the one that mentioned why I got fired at Soddy Daisy.
So you got scared, didn't know what to do, so you lied.
Yes, I did. Okay. I did lie. 22 years, I've never lied about anybody about that. So, like I said, I've learned my lesson. But I was honest, when I talked to y'all, I'm the one that told y'all why I got fired. I didn't want to lie again. I mean, I wanted to be true. I wanted to be truthful with y'all.
Mr. Chairman Parton, sir, Mr. Langford, you realize that what really brought attention by this board to you was all this hopping and skipping of agencies real quick back to back.
Yes,
you realize that?
Yes, sir. When I left Soddy, I got hired at Graysville. I'm a diabetic, and Graysville didn't have insurance, but I needed a job because I have a family.
Yes, sir.
And I've always worked my whole life. I've never not had a job. So I went to Graysville, and I advised Graysville, hey, I need a job. They hired me because I worked there before. And I told them, I said, as soon as I find something better, I got to have insurance. I'll leave. And then I got hired by Harriman, and I was at Harriman for 5 months because of the insurance. But I was having to drive back and forth. It was an hour drive. my original plan was when my kids got out of school, we was going to move to Harriman, me and my wife. And she got a job, and I couldn't ask her to quit her job. So Spring City reached out to me and offered me a job, same money, insurance, and retirement, 20 minutes from my house. And that's the reason I come to Spring City. But I'm not planning on going anywhere else. I'm 45 years old. I've been in this law enforcement for 22 years, and I'm getting too old to be jumping around.
Understand. You is everything settled down in your life now? And
Yes, sir.
do you have a home? Do you and your family in the home?
Yes, sir. I have a home now. I have 2 vehicles now. I got rid of the old truck because it always tore up on me, and I'm doing good.
How old are your children?
I got a 8-year-old, 7-year-old. We got autism, and then I got a 4-year-old daughter. Of course, I got 2 older kids by previous marriage, but.
What's your wife do now?
She actually works for the city of Graysville. She's the assistant to the HR.
So things are in your life. Would you describe them as kind of calming down and trying to get into a normal flow and routine?
Yes, sir. Probably first time in my life in a long time we've actually.
Have you had any issues at Spring City PD since you've been there?
No, sir.
Okay, what shift do you work?
I work right now. We're short staffed, so I'm working a 2 to 2, 2 p.m. to 2 a.m.
I got a question for the lieutenant. Y'all were aware of all this. You know the background. Tell us how you feel about it.
We were. Officer Lankford had previously applied to us before going to Harriman, I believe. We were going through some old applications, reached out. When he came in for his interview, he was very candid about the situation. We also spoke with Harriman prior to offering him a job, and they advised us they'd come before you guys for a waiver due to in-service. And he was very candid. And, all this was brought to our attention prior to. Chief made the decision to go ahead and bring him aboard. He felt confident in Mr. Lankford.
How many officers y'all have in Spring City?
Currently, we are 7 full-time, and we are looking at 1 part-time. We're short-staffed 2 officers.
Where is he at now with his in-service and mandated training hours?
Thankfully, with Harriman, he's already got over 40 hours. The only thing he's currently missing is his 8 hours firearm. He's got about an hour of firearms, but he'll complete it with us, the 8 hours when we do ours.
So everything getting compiled down into Spring City now, where he's building a good training file and
yes, sir.
Getting the hours he needs under one agency.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Commissioner Isbell, has there been conversations with your prosecutor, your DA's office, and how are they going to deal with this in court with testimony?
To be completely honest with you, sir, I'm not sure if Chief has had those conversations or not. I don't want to answer something and.
I worked in Graysville for almost a year after Saudi. I've never had no issues with the DAs prosecuting any of my cases. If that's,
I guess the question would be: is the district attorney's office aware that you were terminated, or from your previous agency, or that your employment there came to an end because you lied? That would be the question. Are they aware?
I don't know. I just know I've never had no issues with them since I've been.
Are you in the 12th Judicial? Yes, sir. Yeah. From personal knowledge of that judicial district, the situation, particularly in this case with him, would not be an issue with the DA there based off it was a internal. It wasn't dealing with a criminal investigation. It was dealing with policy within the department. It wasn't that he lied about an arrest or a DUI or theft or something of that matter. It was just he was in his patrol car and GPS clicked it on, and and there was no criminal charges. So the current DA there or the assistants would not have not spoken or thinking anything about that.
If it does come up, you'll have to go through the same conversation.
I will speak to Chief today, and I'll make sure if he hasn't already that he does go ahead and have that conversation with him.
The 12th Judicial, for you board members that don't know, is the held district of the state. It runs from dang near the Alabama line to the Kentucky line. It is the worst judicial district for any DA to geographically travel. And it's 2 hours from one end of the district to the other, and they have a new DA there. They have a great district. They're my neighboring judicial district, and they have a lot of little departments and several counties in it, and they have a new outstanding DA over there, and she's really aggressive in trying to help these smaller departments and really beef things up over there, just for point of information.
This is Commissioner. If this was to go through with no action today, is there anything on the agenda for tomorrow for in-service waivers, or is he would still have to have some kind of waiver at this point?
There's nothing on the agenda for tomorrow.
He would still be required to get a waiver, though, would he not, for his missing the in-service hours that he did?
I think we need to look and see exactly how the commission handled that particular incident or that waiver request before, because I don't recall if the commission granted the waiver or if we just sent it to investigation.
I'm pretty sure I'm probably the one that made the motion. I think we just moved it straight to the informal. We didn't do anything on the waiver.
That's why I'm here today, because
That's correct.
did that.
Mr. Langford, I hope you realize how serious this board takes lying and truthfulness. As a police officer of the state of Tennessee or anywhere, I mean, you're upheld to the highest standards, and being truthful is one of the most important things you can be doing. And I think that's kind of what got you to where you are today, and hopefully you realize that. As Sheriff said, it wasn't in a criminal matter, or this would probably go a totally different way. But I'm going to make a motion for no action, and if there is a waiver or something that's required, maybe we can squeeze it into tomorrow's agenda.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion for no action and a second for that. Do we have any other discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, no action.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Wright, I was going to say, too, about if we handle this tomorrow, but there would not be really any reason for them to have to appear. We can kind of handle it amongst ourselves, probably.
You understand what we're going to try to do? We're going to try to get you and the department, Mr. Langford, in the department in compliance tomorrow, but you will not have to appear. Now, if you want to get the Zoom link and be on by Zoom just to hear the conversation and know what's going on. But Mr. Langford, stay steady, communicate and with your superiors in your department, and just stay focused. We hope you and your family, I know you've been through a lot with a house fire, and that's, just trying to make a living. I understand, but just hang in there, okay? All right. Yep.
And very quickly, Assistant Director Bello, if you could just make sure that that's added on to tomorrow's agenda. All right, moving on to Skylar Shane Lopp of the Lawrenceburg Police Department. Mr. Lopp was terminated for violation of policies and procedures. He was not here earlier. Mr. Lopp, are you in the audience? Mr. Lopp? All parties were aware of the date and location of this decertification and formal hearing.
Motion to approve by default.
We have a motion for default and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It carries. Mount Juliet Police Department. Cody Allen Mang. Mr. Mang was terminated for violation of policies and procedures. Mr. Mang, are you present? Mr. Mang.
Currently improved.
Oh, that's right.
Do they have Zoom and Skype from prison to, by chance? I didn't know if he'd gone. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mang's attorney, Cherry out of Wilson. As to anything.
I'll second Commissioner Wright's motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second for default. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Motion carries. Memphis Police Department. Elijah Graham Presley. Mr. Presley resigned during an internal investigation for violation of policies and procedures. Do we have Mr. Presley here? Okay. Representatives from Memphis Police Department, if y'all would step back up to the podium.
Lieutenant Keith Morse, Internal Affairs Supervisor for the Memphis Police Department. On September 4th, 2021, Memphis Police Department officers Elijah Presley and Raul Perez responded to a domestic disturbance where the female had called stating that her boyfriend had assaulted her. Once arriving at the location and during the course of their investigation, officers Presley and Perez forced entry into the complainant's home and used force against her in order to place her under arrest. During that arrest, she sustained a fractured forearm. An administrative investigation was opened on September 6th, 2021, and the results of the investigation determined that Officer Presley violated the following Memphis Police Department policies: excessive and unnecessary force, personal conduct, misdemeanor offenses concerning the DV policy, domestic violence policy, and search and seizure without a warrant. On March 24, 2022, Officer Presley resigned from the Memphis Police Department prior to a hearing that was scheduled on June 27, 2022, that was to be heard by Deputy Chief Sam Hines of the Memphis Police Department. As of right now, those charges have been held in abeyance.
Any questions from the
Commissioner Cherry, what other officer that was involved in this, has similar action been taken against that officer?
Yes, sir. He also resigned from the police department, and the similar actions have been taken concerning that officer. I don't believe he's been on.
As far as the actual injury to the woman that was arrested, primarily focused on Officer Presley, or is the other officer a part of that? Or
both officers were a part of that, and she was resisting during that arrest inside of her home, where her arm struck a counter as they were as the force was being used.
It wasn't just Officer Presley that was trying to take her and that came into the home, and all of this was both of them together?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Wright, Tennessee, he was in his probationary period. Was he on the FTO program or something at the time?
He was not at that point. He was a lateral officer, came through our lateral program through the training academy. He had completed his training officer days and was operating as a one-man unit on that day.
Any other questions from the members of the informal subcommittee?
I have one other question. As far as notice to the officer, I think one of the claims that he has is that he had no notice that action was going to be taken against him, and he resigned Oklahoma.
He was aware of the internal investigation. I cannot speak as to whether he was aware that there were administrative charges that were stemming from the investigation at the time that he left.
So he wasn't, technically he wasn't resigning in lieu of termination. Nothing like that was on the horizon at that point.
No, sir. No, sir. He had not, at that point, he had not been issued a statement of charges advising him of the hearing prior to his resignation.
Any other questions for the representative from the Memphis Police Department? All right, sir, if you would just have a seat and hang tight, we may need you again. Mr. Presley. Counselor, I know you've already identified yourself, but if you would just identify yourself by name again, please.
Certainly. For the record, my name is Timothy Taylor. I'm an attorney. Cooper.
Elijah Presley.
I sent in a letter to the commission last week. Mr. Presley actually came from, as the officer from the MPD indicated, he came to Memphis from Oklahoma, where he was already certified in Oklahoma through their equivalent of a post, I believe it's called CLEAT.
Yes, sir.
Okay. He was a lateral. He came in. He was commissioned with MPD on December 5th of 2020. He finished his one-year probation on December 5th of 2021. He resigned on March 24th of 2022 to take the job he currently holds as a trooper with the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, which I have to thank for allowing him to appear today, and he probably wins the prize for the longest drive. At the time he resigned, he had never been placed in non-enforcement. He had not been placed in, he had not been relieved of duty. He was working full duty throughout the entire time of his career at Memphis Police Department. The incident in September did result in an IAB investigation. They didn't investigate. He did give a statement, and that's the last he heard about it. He did not see the statement of charges until I emailed them to him last week after I received it from the Post Commission. As the officer indicated, they had never been served on him. According to the statement of charges, if you look on the date they were prepared, it was November 12th, 2021. That was 3 weeks before his probationary period ended. At that point, they could have terminated him without cause because under the probationary period for the city of Memphis, he would have no access to civil service, he would have no access to the grievance procedure, so they could have terminated him without cause. Even after his probationary period ended, they could have terminated him, or excuse me, they could have served him with the statement of charges and set a hearing any point up to the time of his resignation, which was on March 24th, 2022. That did not happen. As a matter of fact, and if you look at the end of the statement of charges, there's signature blocks or initial blocks for the deputy director and deputy chief to sign off on the statement of charges. The deputy director did not sign off on the statement of charges until May 25th of 2022. The deputy chief did not sign off on them, I believe, until sometime in June of 2022, which was 2 to 3 months after he had already resigned. He said he worked full duty the entire time. He was never served with a statement of charges. They didn't even process the statement of charges till several months after he left. If the Memphis Police Department, and one other point, that's the internal affairs investigation. There was no administrative hearing. An administrative hearing officer never ruled on whether these charges were sustained or not, and never, even if they found there was any grounds to sustain those charges, didn't issue any sort of discipline. And in fact, as the hearing was set for June 27th, but it was set 2 months after he'd already left. So if the MPD felt that his actions justified termination, there was no action that they took that gave any indication of that. They allowed him to work full duty throughout the entire time of his career, never gave him any notice of anything, and he resigned, and then several months after he resigned, they gave these statement of charges. So as the commission noted on the agenda, he was not actually, he didn't actually resign during an investigation. The investigation was over, and no action had been taken, and he just resigned and took a profitable job, shall we say, at the Oklahoma Highway Patrol.
Mr. Chairman Parton, so the incident occurred September 4th, 2021. Yes. Is that right? And he resigned March 24th of 22. What were you doing? Refresh me again. What were you doing between September 4th of 21 and March 24th of 22?
My understanding is he was working full duty as a patrol officer.
In Memphis, Tennessee?
In the Memphis Police Department, never relieved a duty and never put on a desk.
All right. When was the Post Commission notified from Memphis of an issue?
I believe the date on their request, actually there's not a date on their request.
That's what I was noticing on my sheet.
I see on the checklist here that we emailed on the 22nd of May of this year.
Statement of charges date November 12th of 21. What was shown by the city of Memphis, but I see in handwriting, held in abeyance, resigned 3/24, and you resigned. Is it my understanding, Counselor, he resigned to go to Oklahoma Highway Patrol?
Yes, which is where he is now. And the held in abeyance, resigned, typically with the Memphis Police Department, that is done. That notation is done when the statement of charges has gone from internal affairs, gone up to the deputy director and to the deputy chief, and has been signed off by those to be issued to the officer.
And I'm not seeing any statements of investigations or anything from internal affairs on his behalf, or was he ever interrogated on this?
He did give a statement.
Oh,
he was aware of the investigation, and he did give a statement, but after he gave his statement, he never heard anything more about it.
Okay.
And also, just to let the members of this informal committee know that if you look in your packet, the request for decertification, it's signed by the chief of the Memphis Police Department, but there is no date on that form. It's signed, but it's not dated.
The decertification request was submitted and received by us on November 30th of 2022.
I'm going to make a motion to take no action.
We have a motion for taking no action on this, and we have a second. Do we have any further discussion? Before we take the vote on that, can I ask your client a question? If you would just describe the background process for it's Oklahoma Highway Patrol. Can you describe the background process on that? And
yes, sir.
And did you tell them about what had happened in Memphis? And
yes, sir. Yes, I did tell them. So the background process, it starts off with a polygraph examination, which I passed. They were aware of everything surrounding this investigation. Then I was assigned a background investigator. I believe he had up to a month to complete the background. I think it took him about 2 weeks or so. He had contacted my lieutenant at the time, who told him that they had no issues with my employment, that I was a good employee for them, and I believe that they even told them about the investigation and that they believed everything was good to go with it.
All right, so we have a motion for no action, and we have a second on that motion. Any further discussion?
I'm going to just jump in here for a second. I would agree that, this is Commissioner Cherry, I would agree that the procedures that have happened in this case are troubling, and the department, the agency should have been on top of this a little better. But at the same time, I feel very disturbed about the background of this case and the actual action that is the subject of discipline. It's disturbing to me that we don't have more of a report of the investigation to be able to determine exactly what happened. If we've got two officers that are basically busting into a house and dragging a woman out and breaking her arm in the process, even though she may be unruly to some extent, I mean, that's a serious violation. our back or turn away our consideration of those matters because of technical violations, that it bothers me. And so perhaps you can all put my concerns to rest a little bit here.
I would, General Cherry, you are spot on in the matter, but I know in the climate of Shelby County right now, with the body camera footage that was in this, if there was some kind of criminal wrongdoing, I would say they would have probably been before a grand jury in Shelby County. And based off what the investigation is, it looks to me like, and y'all know I have no problem addressing the pink elephants in the state, this was a retroactive of digging up records because of all the crap that's going on over there, and they're backfilling and CYAing over there and sending us a lot of this. I guarantee you the state of Oklahoma Highway Patrol would be just like the Tennessee Department of Safety, and they've dug into this, and they've hired this young man, and it's a shame we've lost him in the state of Tennessee, but it sounds to me like a routine arrest was where they had to go in and arrest somebody, and unfortunately accidents happen and people get scuffed and marked up. But
also, the lieutenant, I think I'm correct, testified that it was he was resisting. Actually have a problem with that, the best I heard. Lieutenant, you go.
Sir, would you step back up, please?
And I hear you say that she was resisting and you didn't really have a problem with that, or y'all didn't really have a problem with that?
No, it wasn't so much that we didn't have a problem with that. The crux of this really more or less involved the lack of any de-escalation that occurred prior to this happening, and the certain procedures that were not followed prior to them entering the home, where the use of force could have been avoided had those procedures been followed.
And Lieutenant, while you're here, what took us so long to get it up here? I'm not trying to, because I see a lot of the Memphis Command up here in my soon to be 5 years on this board, but when you look at the dates and the paperwork, it's kind of obvious a little bit, but this was just longevity, and I know if y'all had to have had word, because background investigators had to contact from Oklahoma to Shelby County on this gentleman, that he would be jobless right now if somebody off the record did not give a good recommendation for this gentleman. And then y'all are in a bad position up here representing the city. I think you probably need to use your Fifth Amendment right now. So that's what my advice is as chairman of this board. No further questions.
Is it common with just, he continued to work during the course of this investigation? And am I correct on the dates that he continued to work after the investigation was completed? Or was the investigation completed after he had resigned and left?
The investigation was completed and turned in to the administration after he had resigned and left. That's when the administrative file was turned in.
So, okay, the investigation, was the investigation completed before he resigned?
Yes.
And he was still working even after the completion of the investigation?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Cherry, does this settle your concerns? And you're generally not one. You're always kind of the calm of the storm here.
I tend to always, pretty much always, err on the side of the officer, trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. And in this case, it appears to me, and I don't know if this is proper for me to even say this on the record, but it appears to me that what we're doing is we're kind of giving the agency the benefit of the doubt, kind of speculating that if there were something that the agency found that was so terrible that we would be not allowing this officer to continue in service, that would have happened. And we're kind of reading between the lines to say, well, they didn't see anything that was so bad, so they must like this officer and think that he was acting properly, and so that's why no action was taken, and so let's let him keep playing the game. I hope that's not too far off track, and perhaps this is a situation where we need to give the agency as well as the officer the benefit of the doubt. I think I'll sleep okay tonight by adding my my vote to that of the rest of the committee.
All right, so we have a motion for no action and a second. Anybody else? All right, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. No action.
No, I have one last question for Mr. Taylor. I'm just curious. Since you have two clients up here from Memphis and you make that drive, do you split your cost between the two, or do you get charge them twice?
I'm on retainer. I'm an attorney for the Memphis Police Association, and both officers and gentlemen were members of the Memphis Police Association at the time these issues arose. So I'm here. If these officers are members of the Memphis Police Association and they have any problems, I will represent them.
Glad to have you here, Mr. Taylor. You're always a breath of fresh air.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on to the Tullahoma Police Department and Jacob Samuel Smith. Mr. Smith resigned during an internal investigation that could have resulted in termination. Let's see. Is Mr. Smith? He is here. Okay. Would representatives of the Tullahoma Police Department please step up to the podium? If you would, sir, identify yourself by name and rank and tell us about why you're here today.
Yes, panel, my name is Jason Williams. I'm the Chief of Police with the Tullahoma Police Department. The reason I'm here today is on April 25th of 2020, Officer Smith was involved in answering a domestic violence call. During the process of responding to that domestic call and investigating it, he got into pursuit with the suspect at 3 different times. He was told by his supervising officer to terminate that pursuit each time he got in pursuit, and he still continued to pursue. At some point, things escalated to the point where it evolved into an officer-involved shooting, and Officer Smith shot the suspect as a result of actions that occurred. We had called in the TBI and the DA's office to investigate the shooting. We began conducting an investigation alongside for looking at administrative issues. During the process of that, it became apparent that there were some concerns that we had with some incidents that happened during the shooting that have to do with disregarding the direct order from the immediate supervisor to discontinue any pursuing of the suspect, as well as some actions and statements made by the officer from the in-car video of the shooting itself.
Do you have any questions from the members of the informal committee?
This is Commissioner Cherry. Are there any pending criminal charges against the officer for this shooting?
No, sir. It was presented to the grand jury, and the grand jury did not take any action.
As a matter of policy, I'm probably the only person on this committee that's not a present or past officer, so I'd have to educate me. In a case like this, where you have a suspect of a crime that's fleeing, I understand the policy not to pursue perhaps in a vehicle because it creates a greater danger than what the suspect just by being out. As far as the shooting is concerned, what would be the policy in this case? I'm assuming that you don't shoot at people when they're running away. That's basically the policy.
That is correct, sir. Without getting too far into the weeds, the final time that resulted in the final pursuit of the suspect, the officer somewhat pinned the suspect in and then jumped out of his car and would try to detain the suspect at gunpoint. At that point in time, the suspect then fled again from the officer, and that's when the officer opened fire.
And again, there aren't any pending charges against the officer for the shooting. That was
That is
presented
correct.
to the grand jury, and they let him go.
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Wright, I have just one or two. Chief, in reading it, it sounded like y'all knew who the suspect was, so warrants would have been able to get obtained and handled it later, kind of deal. Do we know when this decertification request was sent in? It was April 20.
At the time it was submitted, I believe the grand jury stuff was still pending, so it was kind of just hanging. And once all that was being concluded, it's just been getting to the pile and clearing them out and clearing through the backlog and getting them on the agenda.
This is Chairman Parton. For the members of the board, I wasn't involved in this investigation and deeply involved with this investigation due to the fact that this went into where Tullahoma lays geographically in Coffee and parts of Franklin County. But I assisted TBI and the Tullahoma Police Department and the Franklin County Sheriff's Department personally in this case, so I will not be voting in it. And because the case was held in our grand jury in Coffee County.
I got a question. TBI investigated.
Yes, sir.
What did they actually come up with? What was their actual finding other than going to? I know they went to grand jury and presented, but they sent you something, I guess.
Yes, sir. We were able to obtain video footage of the shooting itself, as well as pulling all the in-car video from everything that occurred. So we everything, reality of everything. Some incidents that occurred, reviewing the in-car camera video that were very concerning to us.
But I mean, presented to the grand jury. What did they say? What did they tell you? You can't tell me what to say to the grand jury, but what did they say to you? This is a justified shooting, or?
My understanding is that they were concerned by what they saw as well.
They didn't give a ruling?
No, sir. That was all done between them and the DA's office.
If I read this right, he also had some problems with agitation. I think the word was used. He was agitated.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us about that?
Yes, sir. It became apparent reviewing the in-car camera footage that Officer Smith became enraged and had lost his temper. At one point in time, he punched the patrol car after being told to terminate the pursuit. At another incident, he got into a verbal altercation with a citizen that he was trying to, I guess, maneuver around or get around to get after the suspect, and the citizen was in his way.
He knew who this person was? Y'all knew who he was?
Yes, sir. Once the initial officers arrived on scene, they were able to determine who the suspect was from the incident.
And I read this right.
Yes, sir. After the shooting occurred, he was placed on administrative leave with the Tullahoma Police Department, and then during that process, he resigned his position.
This is Commissioner Wright again, Chief. The allegations that the suspect looks like it was domestic violence assault was that I guess, how bad of assault was that? Was the victim wasn't shot, stabbed, nothing like that?
No, sir. I believe the victim was physically assaulted, but there was no injury that required any medical treatment.
Assuming that the subject was prosecuted for the assault.
Yes, sir.
At a later.
Yes, sir.
Legal, can I ask a question since I'm abstaining from the vote? Chief, did the city of Tullahoma pay a civil settlement out over this case?
Yes, sir.
Was it a large sum of money?
Yes, sir.
Was it undisclosed amount of money?
Yes, sir.
Any other questions from members of the informal committee or the department's chief executive?
Just one last question. Do you know what the extent of the injuries were to the man that was shot in the neck?
Yes, sir. The round entered in the backside of his neck and then came out through the front of his neck. He did require
so far as you know, were there any permanent disabilities that resulted out of this?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Anyone else? All right, Chief, if you would just have a seat, and if we need you, we'll call you back up. Mr. Smith? You would identify yourself with your name and go ahead and give us your side.
My name is Jacob Smith. As far as Chief Williams said on the 25th, what occurred did occur. I can get to the point of what most of you are thinking right now and just be transparent. That day I did get emotionally invested. That day I did become angry. And that day I did lose my temper. As far as the shooting is concerned, I did fire my weapon because I believed that my life was in danger. But I know now that my mistake was becoming emotionally invested, and my mistake was not simply taking the time to step back from it and go get warrants, like I had done on cases before. I can look at it with clarity, with hindsight and humility, and say that I did become emotionally invested. To speak to my character, I harbor no ill will to that man or anyone else involved at all. In January of 2021, I got hired by another employer at the Air Force Base, at Arnold Air Force Base. I was transparent and honest with them then. And while at Walmart, that same subject from that call confronted me while I was with my wife and children, to illustrate the fact that I mean when I say I have no ill will towards that subject or anyone else, and that it was not personal. I was holding my son, who was about a year old at the time, in my arms when it occurred. I didn't go after that man. 911 was called. Tullahoma Police did show up. But I know what my mistakes were that day. And I did not fire my weapon because I hadn't thought about it. I did think that I was in danger. I was aware of the policy of not to pursue, and I was aware of the situation and everything that occurred during that time. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Tell us what you're doing now. You said you're working at Arnold.
Yes, sir. I did work at Arnold from January 2021. I left in April. I'm currently not working right now. That was just a personal decision. We're homeschooling our children, and my wife is a nurse, and the work schedule there is a lot. They had just went into 12, so I left. I left because I couldn't make that work at home.
How
I worked there for 2 years, sir. Security.
Mr. Smith, what are your intentions as far as working in law enforcement in the future? Do you intend to do you have hopes to get back into law enforcement, or what are your plans that way?
At this time, I am not trying to pursue law enforcement. I did apply for Moore County Police or Sheriff's Department a while back because I did hold that interest. I did not get the job, I'm assuming, because this was in effect. I don't know for sure because they didn't tell me. As of now, I'm not trying to seek law enforcement. More or less, like all of us who have been through it, I'm proud of what I achieved through being post-certified and going to the police academy. And outside of being a husband and a father, that career was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done.
Let me ask just one last question, if I may. For us, looking at the material that's before us, it appears that when you fired your weapon, the suspect in this case was fleeing. You're telling us today that you believe his life was in danger. I wonder if you could just explain what some of the circumstances.
Yes, sir. I pulled in front of his vehicle. Imagine he pulled up in front of me at a stop sign. On the third attempt to stop him, I pulled around him and basically parked like this. Exited my vehicle and walked around to the passenger side of my vehicle in an attempt to stop him. That was a mistake because at that point he came forward. And at that point, when I backed up, I started to lose my footing and got pinned against my car. And I felt like I was about to get run over. He turned, and I fired my weapon. He drove over a curb, through some grass, and onto the main highway.
So even after he was shot, he continued to drive away? Is that
quite a bit, sir?
Do you know when he was finally stopped, or when he went to the hospital, or what? How did that chase end?
I was not there for the end. My corporal was not there. He was the one on shift for that day. He is the one that told me to stop on those 3 accounts. After the situation continued to escalate and after I had fired my weapon, I continued to follow him. We made it to Estill Springs before my corporal came over the radio and told me to stop, disengage completely, and I did. I did not see the end of it, nor do I know how it ended. I was not involved.
Commissioner Wright. Mr. Smith, how long had you been a police officer at that time?
4 years and 3 months, roughly. July of 2015, I believe, would have been my 5th year.
You say you took it, you got emotionally involved. Did you know the party that was involved? Did you know either party?
No, sir. I didn't know either one of them personally in any way. My emotional investment was due to the other circumstances that were going on. Both my corporal over the radio and just the sheer fact that every time we tried to disengage, he wound up somewhere right in front of us again in town, driving recklessly. And at one point I did make an attempt to go back to the victim prior to that, and then instead I made the choice to stop that 3rd time. I can tell you now, I wish I hadn't.
So your emotion pretty much was just getting, for lack of better words, pissed off because, 1, you couldn't pursue him, and 2, the guy was running.
Yes, sir. And not even to get away. In my opinion. That is an opinion. That's...
Let me ask you this. Without any counseling or anything?
The department made no attempt to debrief me before I resigned. And I, while sitting here, have come to the realization of how important you take resigning in lieu of termination. At that time, between the time of the shooting and me resigning, I had 2 off-the-record meetings with Chief Williams, one in his office and one at his home in his garage. Both of those times, I was advised by Chief Williams, we are going to make a decision that is probably not in your best interest. It might be best for you to resign. He didn't outright tell me to. He just insinuated it, and I took his advice. I did not know at that time the ramifications of that choice, or I would have wrote it out.
Maybe missing. Personally taken any stance to deal with your emotional side?
Yes, sir.
Personally, not through the department, anything else, anything that you've done to,
Yes, sir, I understand. Prior to working at the base, I did go see a therapist shortly a few times and talked about it. It wasn't really in depth, but it was more or less about my emotions and how to deal with things. I've also sat down with other law enforcement friends that I do have to hash it out and talk it out and get it out of my system since the shooting occurred. I can tell you now, sir, I am not the same man today standing in front of you as I was the day I pulled that trigger. I've learned what humility is, I've learned what patience is, and I've learned what conduct as just as a person of your own, what it means to keep yourself in check. I don't want to live that nightmare again, and I won't.
Commissioner Wright, I have some pretty grave concerns if he was to continue to be a police officer. One, if he's put in this position again and he makes the decision not to pull the trigger when it could be a justified shooting and even putting himself in a position of harm, because it'll always be a second-guessing kind of thing that will be happening. And based upon the totality of what we heard, I'd make a motion for decertification.
Second.
Comments. 3 years.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No, sir, I'm straight.
Happen to agree. Down the road might be a different.
We have a motion for decertification, and we have a second. Is there any other discussion?
I'm just going to chime in for a moment here. Again, as you all know, I tend to kind of come down on the side of the officer in these cases, and this is a circumstance where I feel like I need to. I'm probably not going to win here, but I need to say something and just say that circumstances and lawyers have said, you can get a ham sandwich indicted. Well, this ham sandwich didn't get indicted, and that's because I'm guessing because evidence and that was sent to trial. I understand that there was a settlement, and that the city or the county or whoever paid out some money on this case. At the same time, though, just viewing this officer, former officer, and his demeanor and what he's been through and what he's endured and what he's not be voting.
All that up and saying that I'm looking at it from a personal standpoint.
Sir.
Being in law enforcement 45. You don't get over that quick.
Yeah, speak.
Personal health. I'm not sure you should get back on personal issue. Father,
Can you speak to what you mean when you say personal issues?
Well, the emotional side of it.
My emotional side has changed completely. And that emotional investment was due to the circumstance itself, not as a character as a whole.
I'm not saying, I'm just saying it's a traumatic event.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't heal all, but it's a good gauge.
Sir.
And my concern is for you personally. Police officers, yeah. 3 years is.
Okay. I do.
You handled yourself. So I know you're growing, but I'm not ready.
Okay. May I speak to Mr. Wright's comment as well? I respect your opinion, sir. You're right to feel that way. But in response to it, I got hired by an Air Force base doing security armed every day with the understanding that if there was a problem within that base or coming onto that base, that weapon wasn't just for show. They hired me with the understanding that if needed to pull that trigger, I could pull that trigger. I don't ever want to, but it doesn't mean I can't. It Doesn't mean that I can't defend myself, and it doesn't mean that I haven't thought this exact same thing that you voiced today. But I know who I am, and I know what I'm capable of, and I evolved from it and learned from it. As far as my emotional state that day goes, there was a lot that went into it. I had a lot on my mind. I had a lot going on at home, and I had a lot in general. Each of you know how law enforcement is. And I'm here to tell you the 3 years that I have spent out of it has caused me to grow positively, not in the direction that you're insinuating.
From personal experience.
Yes, sir, I understand.
I feel like that time is not a cure-all.
No, sir, it's not.
Commissioner Isbell, not basing the decision on where you are today. You disobeyed direct orders.
Yes, sir.
Resulted in a shooting with injuries. That's not your chief's fault. That's not the supervisor's fault that we're calling you off.
Sir.
You've accepted the responsibility, and it's great that you're moving forward and you have another job. But had you have done what you were supposed to do on this particular night, we would not be here today. And that's where the decision is coming down to. And that's why I will be voting to decertify you.
Yes, sir.
Any further discussion? Here we have a motion for decertification. We have a second. All those in favor, say aye. Any opposed?
No. Abstain.
The ayes have it. We have one no and one abstention. You have 30 days if you wish to appeal this to the full commission for a formal hearing.
Thank you.
All right, next up is Michael Ryan Strope, Charleston Police Department. Mr. Strope provided false information to Post. Do we have a representative from the Charleston Police Department? You may.
Kevin Creed, Post Investigator. The Charleston Police Department now has a new police chief, and they submitted a letter to the commission addressing they do not want to continue this at this point. Else. But,
Investigator, you said that the police department does not want to pursue it now because of a changing of an administration.
That is correct.
Where does Mr. Strope work now?
I believe he's not currently employed as a police officer. He may be able to speak further, but in Acatus, he's not listed as a full-time officer. That's the only basis I have. He may be a reserve officer or a part-time officer. I wouldn't know that information.
I don't know that they have a new chief has the right to. I don't know that a new administration has the right to pull that once it's submitted, do they? If it was done under administration, was that done by the city administrator or the mayor or the?
It was submitted by the previous chief.
By the previous chief.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you look back at this particular circumstance, Mr. Strope, if you want to go ahead and step up, you may, and we'll have you identify yourself here in just a moment. Essentially, and I believe you and I had spoken, this had been sort of held in this, not really a suspended status, but it just kind of been hanging out there. I believe you were deployed or had gone overseas, a contractor or something along those lines. Was it a military deployment?
Yes, sir, it was.
Okay. And so basically he contacted me to see if we could get this in front of the commission in a timely manner, because it is hard to be employed if you have a pending decertification, obviously, for obvious reasons, that agencies are a bit reticent to touch that. And so as I recall reading this particular case, that there was an admission that the DD-214 was altered originally, and when we started looking into this, the DD-214 that was submitted had been altered because part of it had been cut off. However, the part that was on there, and this is from the DD-214, was an honorable discharge. So the reason for discharge was cut off, but the type of discharge was not. And so an honorable discharge is the only requirement for certification in this particular case. And I can defer it to legal as well, but it was altered to remove the reference to a personality disorder, but it was an honorable discharge. So nothing that was cut off would have impacted his ability to have been certified. And the Post Commission had, at an earlier date, accepted that DD 214 and had processed it through. So, and you can describe the circumstances, Mr. Strope, of how that was discovered, but just in full disclosure, Post did accept the original DD 214 and had looked it over and accepted it for the file.
Motion to take no action.
Second.
We have a motion to take no action on this decertification request and a second. Do we have any discussion?
Commissioner Wright, I just thank you for your service. Appreciate it.
I was going to let the commission know too, during this whole incident while I was deployed, anyone that has served in the military knows that the VA takes forever to get paperwork, to get a DD 214. And as I was talking to Mr. Bello during this whole situation, I ended up getting my DD 214 while I was gone. It took him a year and a half to finally be able to get the front and back copy. So this is the one that will be submitted to Post for the correction, the corrected one.
All right, thank you very much. We have a motion to take no action. We have a second on that motion. Any further discussion from the commission? All right, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No? All right, not taking any action on it. Good luck.
Commissioners, thank you so much.
Tennessee Department of Safety and Homeland Security, Daryl Wayne Valise. Mr. Valise, are you in the audience?
Motion to approve by default.
We have a motion for default. A default order of decertification for the resignation in lieu of termination. We have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. And finally, the last item on this 5-page agenda, is Lakin Price Whitlock of the Kingsport Police Department. Is Officer Whitlock here? Okay, good. And the Kingsport Police Department. Okay. If you would, sir, go ahead and step up to the podium. Identify yourself by name and rank or position, and go ahead and tell the informal subcommittee why it is that you're here today and that you're bringing this decertification request of Ms. Whitlock.
For your time, I'm Dale Phipps. I'm Chief of Police of Kingsport. In the early morning hours of September the 28th, 2021, then Officer Whitlock arrested a unruly, intoxicated, and combative female. Upon arrival in our jail, she incarcerated her in our holding cell, and during that incarceration time, the suspect spat upon Officer Whitlock. The jail door had already closed. Officer Whitlock ordered the jail matron to open the cell door. Officer Whitlock entered the cell and struck the suspect with a closed fist on two different occasions. An internal affairs investigation was opened in that after seeing the video, and it was our conclusion after investigation that a termination proceeding should come to fruition. During the termination proceeding, Officer Whitlock did resign her position with the city.
Questions from the informal committee?
As Chairman Parton, was there action taken by criminal charges against the officer?
Yes, we did make contact with Sullivan County District Attorney's Office. They referred the matter to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation for a criminal look at it. There has been subsequent charges out of that, two misdemeanor assault charges, and to my knowledge, it has been continued till August.
So it's still pending?
Yes, sir.
In court. I make a motion to postpone this until the criminal case is concluded. I think that would be compliance with what we've done with the others, to be in all fairness.
All right, your motion is to suspend the decertification request until, or is it the decertification request and her post-certification?
Until all the criminal matter is completed and with the district attorney general.
Okay.
Do we anticipate it's going to trial, or is there going to be a plea, or where do we know what the status is?
It was reset the 7th time last week, if I'm not mistaken.
Don't sound like it's getting close to a plea if it's on
No,
its
sir.
7th continuance.
Correct.
Is there video of this from the jail?
There is.
Prepared to have that for the formal then, if they've continued it 7 times in the courts. I imagine it's going to be on the show here. But I still hold my motion to continue this until we get a matter out of court.
Just to clarify, it is to also suspend her certification as well, right?
It would be in suspension,
Okay.
yes, and till we can get a conclusion of the criminal side.
All right, we have a motion, and do we have a second? Yes. We had a second. General Cherry. Any discussion? All right, hearing none.
I'm sorry, do we need to let the other side have a chance to talk before we take a vote?
I mean, it's an informal, from what I understand from legal. They can, the commission can make this determination without hearing from the other side.
And yes, and I would advise their Fifth Amendment rights up here today. Again, people don't realize that, but anyway, I would make a suggestion that use your Fifth Amendment right.
So we have a motion, a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, matter is suspended, and the certification for Ms. Whitlock is also suspended until the conclusion of the criminal matter. Do we have anything else, members of the subcommittee?
Yes, I think we spoke earlier. Since we have a good majority here of showing today, I'm glad to see everybody here for the number we have for the informals. And I think on the request by Commissioner Wright that legal is going to work on the formal hearings instead of having trying to have those on Friday afternoons. That we're going to try to work on having those on. Did you say Tuesday mornings? Thursday mornings. Thursday mornings, if we can look at that in the future, Thursday mornings for formals, unless otherwise you see that they're really. I just couldn't remember if you said. That's what it was.
I had said Tuesday, and it was met with a resounding no from the group. So we do have a formal tomorrow. Anything else, commissioners? Thank you all very much for your time. This meeting is adjourned.